everybody, and welcome to the Casual Sports Podcast. As always, I'm Alec Alberta, joining me yet again today, the man who just celebrated a birthday, Mike Wolfgang. Mike, happy birthday. Happened over this past weekend. Congratulations on getting another year older. Fortunately, your sports teams are taking a dip this season. Well, Cowboys not looking too bad early on.
Hey, that's our. Hey, other than the Pirates, I'm looking all right now.
Penn State is they're
Cavs
coming
are
up
getting
and
preseason underway. They're hoping for a big year.
Yeah, how about the Penguins? What do you think they're going to do this year?
You never know until it starts.
You never know
because every year you're like, oh, they're old. They're old. They're going to have another down year. They just don't have down years. So
talk about a team that is not having a down year. How about not a down week? The Philadelphia Phillies, Mike, playing against the Braves right now in the NLDS. They're winning. I believe it's now 4-1. As I got the game on here in the background as well on my computer. Kind of a bit of shocker. And you looked at that first round of the MLB postseason, Mike, and the lower seed won in every game except the Guardians Tampa Bay series. The 6 seed wins over the 6 and the 5 seed win in the National League, and a 5 and a 3 seed win in the American League.
And Cleveland was the only home team to win.
Right. Only home team to win. And you're already kind of looking at now, second round, Atlanta's the home team, and they're losing 4-1. It's only the top of the third, so a very long ways to go. But MLB postseason, we're going to keep an eye on it here as we go through the next couple weeks of the show, because it's one of the few live events going on at 2:00. Normally, Mike, we get the breaking news at about 3:03 right after we end the show.
Yeah. And hey, you guys know baseball is my favorite sport, but this is why the baseball playoffs is one of the best, because you don't know who's going to win. You really don't. You see games like Cleveland had 15 innings and it only goes one run. You just don't know at all.
Yeah, and how about the fact the youngest team in baseball is going to be going up against the Yankees, the most expensive team in baseball. I wish I could just, go flashback to beginning of the baseball season when everyone was like, oh man, myself included, was like, Guardians it's going to be a down year. They're rebuilding. They might have some good spots and, they're really young, or, the whole argument about, Cleveland has $50 million they can spend on cap space. Why aren't they spending any of it? They were the third cheapest team in baseball. And now here we are at the end of the season, and they're in the postseason. They have a shot against the Yankees, and their pitching staff's given up 1 run in 2 games throughout the postseason against the Tampa Bay Rays. So you're right. Baseball, it becomes very unpredictable, because who at the beginning of the year would have thought, all right, Seattle's going to snap a 20-year losing streak. The old boys of St. Louis are going to make it to the postseason, despite all the age there and the problems that Albert Pujols has had since he left St. Louis, comes back and he's great. The Mets and the Yankees would both be top teams in the postseason. Obviously, Mets go out, but I mean, completely different from what we were fantasizing about at the beginning of the year. And who would have guessed that the Angels still suck?
A lot of us. Not after that first month they had, but
right, that first month, we were so early in the season, like, it looked like everything was going a certain way. Guardians were down 3rd, 4th. They weren't looking great. The Pirates were one of the top teams early on in the season. Mike, I just remember beginning of the year. I'm gonna dig this hole for you. You went. The Pirates are not finishing in last place. They finished.
They were tied. Technically, they didn't. They were tied.
So they were tied for worst.
And they held the tiebreaker over the Reds. So technically, they did not finish in last place.
Okay, I was looking at the standings and it had Pittsburgh at 5.
Well, here's the reason I was looking. Well, if you look at it, it says 4
both right now.
It says 4 to both their names if you look at some of the rankers schedules.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter. It was still a bad season.
MLB.com/standing. So I'm on the official website.
It was still a bad season. Cincinnati. But I remember I was sitting here. I was like, they're not going to lose 100 games, which they did. So I was wrong with that. And I was like, with the last place stuff. But so technically they didn't, but it's still a bad season. I'm not celebrating it. It's god awful, but
hey, at least you guys found perhaps the best player in baseball in O'Neal Cruz.
I'm serious. I can't wait. He has that potential.
Now, Mike, just hopefully Pittsburgh doesn't do it again and just trade him.
Well, here's the thing, they have a core now where they don't have to do that. They had a Josh Bell where it just didn't fit. They were just in a different direction with guys like that. So hopefully with young guys coming up all together, it stays that way.
Well, let's bring it back in here to our local games. Had to touch on the MLB postseason a bit here since it is your favorite sport. Happy birthday. There's your birthday gift. We touched on the baseball to start out the show. Let's take it into some high school football games from the weekend. Canfield, they blew over Youngstown East 48-0. Mike, this was expected of Canfield. They're really good. They're going to win out this season. They're going to finish 9-1. And you still look, one loss by 3 points to Cheney. They are going to take that and they're going to ride with it. And you really look at where they're going to be come the end of this season. They're going to be right in the mix of things for a potential, state title run. They're going to be looked at like, hey, if there's any team that's going to make it, they have the potential to be one of them. Now, I'm looking right now on the OHSA website, and they have not put out rankings yet today, so that might be coming a little bit later after the show, unfortunately, so we can't talk about what the updated polls look like at the moment. I'll keep checking back on them, see if they get posted while we're doing this, but I imagine Canfield, they're going to be one of these top 4 spots with the loss to Cheney, but back-to-back home games in the postseason, they're going to be sitting pretty.
Yeah, they're looking in a good spot, and I think they're looking in a good spot to finish out the season. I think we talked last week against the remaining schedule with that game against Bournemouth at the end. That could be somewhat of a game coming up here that you can maybe look at, but I think this week coming up too, that's another one that we should be looking at with them. So they're sitting in a good spot momentum-wise. You know what you're going to get with them. They're only lost, like I said, 3-point loss to a really good Cheney team. So Canfield's looking good at this point of the year.
And, unfortunately, on the other side of this, with Youngstown East, not looking so good. And you see Ursuline and Cheney, the final 2 games on their schedule, and you got to go, well, every game they've had a shot of winning at this point is kind of out the door. You thought maybe Akron Ellet, maybe East Cleveland Shaw, maybe Mooney, Howland, Boardman, depending on if they could have a good day, and they just never quite did. They haven't been able to find an offense. I mean, look at some of their games, and their defense was not terrible in a lot of games. I mean, I think holding some of these teams to where they did, and Hubbard beginning of the season, that game being 28-8, I think you kind of expected a little bit more out of the season, especially when they lose 12-8 the next week, and you go, all right, if they ever figure out their offense, that they might be able to pull off a game, but they never quite figured it out, and they've been scoreless the last 3 weeks. You look at the next 2, they probably won't score again, and you really just kind of have to go, what happened? There was a solid, almost promising start to the season, and they haven't been able to kind of hold on to any of that in the last few weeks as the schedule got a little bit harder.
Well, and the thing is I know when you're in games that, like you just ran through the scores, there's some games that they were in, especially the first 2, even against Hubbard, we weren't expecting, but with the second game, they lose by 4 points. Even though you're that right there, they're still marked coming up as losses, and it's hard for you to get any momentum. And I think to get to this point where they're at now 0-8 and to finish these 2 teams that got left on their schedule, it's looking like an 0-10 season for them. But it's when you even though they're not you're playing well, but they're not resulting in wins. It's not going to add up for a good season.
One thing to hope for, any given Friday, Mike, given Friday. Pull off. This would be the upset of the year. I know I've called it a few times. I thought we've had some really big ones. I think this would top any other. I mean, if they could take down Ursuline or Cheney with the seasons that they've had, oh my God. If East does that, a scoreless team these last 3 weeks, they've put together 52 points total on the season. They're averaging basically under a touchdown a game at 6.5 points per game. If they could pull this off, monumental win for not just, high school football, but really for the school, and potentially, one of those wins that kind of turns you around and sends you in the right direction for years to come, kind of being able to build off that win. And especially the last 2 games, these are conference games as well. So there's bad blood already kind of built into these enough there that you can go in and you can pull something like this because you have, experience against these teams and, there's a history there.
And I always say, I've said it countless times on the show, when you're going through a rebuild and you're trying to find yourself, you need to have a statement win, signature win, like you just said, that nobody's picking you to win, to try to jumpstart things, turn things around and get some confidence. Maybe if they can get one of these 2 to go into the next year, we'll see what happens, but it's a tall task.
Now, East last won this game, double overtime in 2019. They won 28-27 during their 2019 campaign. And against Cheney, they actually hold a record all time against them, but their last win came against 2010 before the program went bye-bye.
Yeah,
for a brief time there. But that season they beat Ursuline. They were 4-6. Ursuline finished 2-8. So clearly a very different Ursuline team they're going to be going up against this year. But hey, seeing a win that recent in this program, that there's still some belief in there, and potentially still have some seniors on that program that were there for that win. Use those guys to kind of go back and, see if you can just, win one here in this final week. That's really kind of what they need to find looking forward, because after the last few weeks, not looking great for them right now.
And pride reasons, you don't want to finish 0-10. Nobody wants to have that.
Not at all. Another team in the hunt for an epic finish to the season, Garfield, the G-Men, clobbering Crestview 62-22. Mike, I hate to say it, but these last 3 weeks, stat padding for for Garfield, because against Champion 54-14, Campbell 56-14, Crestview 62-22. They're hunting for 40-point wins right now, because I think part of it, they're stat padding because they don't have a super strength of schedule. In the one hard game that they've had so far against JFK, they lost. So I think now it's about those style points. They need to get some of those big points, blowout wins. They need them kind of for this postseason. I mean, their big game is coming up against Brookfield this week. I mean, that's going to be epic. And I want to say Matt should be on that call. I'm not sure who is.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a game this weekend. Actually, no, pardon me. No, this is in Garfield. So it's going to be the school calling the game. But, it's one of those that it's going to be very interesting to see which way Garfield can go in that game against a Brookfield team. Now they'll play for the third time. Garfield's won both times in the previous matchups. But you've seen in the last 5 weeks against lesser opponents. I mean, they're hunting for 40-point wins. They want these running clocks, and they are going at it relentlessly. I mean, there's no, calling off the dogs for Garfield this season. It seems they are wanting to make it look bad against them. And you look at the side of Crestview and you just go, well, that's a shame, because while it's not a good season for them, they're not a bad team. I mean, especially you look early on in the year, 17-7 lost to Salem, 12-7 to Southern, 42-39 to United. They beat Campbell. Then they get blown out by Brookfield, and you go, yeah, all right, that's Brookfield. They're really good. And then they went against LeBray, and then you see them last week, and you go, 62-22, what the heck? I think that was Garfield trying to one-up what Brookfield did against, Crestview a couple weeks prior, trying to set up the match this week. But you look at Crestview, the 2-5 record, I mean, you look at the first 3 weeks of the season when they were losing, you have a combined, 16, 19 points that they lost by in 3 weeks, that, if they had just gotten a little bit more, we'd be talking about a team that's around 500, maybe better. I mean, if there are only 2 losses came against Brookfield and Garfield, they would have massive, massive wins against Salem, Southern, United. I mean, that would have been a great start to the season for Crestview and really would have propelled them. And maybe they wouldn't have beaten Brookfield and Garfield, but I think they probably would have played with a lot more confidence than they did in those games. And, you go forward in the rest of the season, I think you have to look at them. It's a really good 2-5 football team, and they're going to go in against Champion this week. And with Champion's kind of downfall right now, I like Crestview. Then they got home field advantage for the final game of the season against Newton Falls. I like them to finish 4-5, and kind of the one downside is they're not going to get an opportunity for the 5-win season because of the cancellation game against Liberty that Liberty had to cancel for because of COVID. And I think that's kind of the one down part you look at for Crestview is they had a shot at a really good season. And you almost wonder, have they fallen off a little bit now because they haven't gotten their opportunity to play in a couple of games and they lost the close ones early on?
Well, and use that as something for next year. Hey, we didn't get that extra game. We finished under 500. They had a chance to finish at 500, like you said, or even above it if some other things go their way. But on the side of Garfield, I agree with you with what they're saying, especially these last couple weeks, because you look at the schedule. Let's look at this. Their 2 best games, Lakeview, they only won by 10 points. JFK, they lost by a point. And the next best win, you can make your argument probably is Champion, who just lost to a bad Campbell team like we've just been talking about. So I do want to see some things. I'm very interested to see what happens this week against Brookfield. That's definitely one of the better games. And this is our last chance to kind of prove things like, hey, we can compete with some teams, even though, again, we're not taking anything away from Garfield. We know how good they are, but this is their last actual legit chance before they go in the playoffs.
Yeah, and sorry, trying to find out where – I gotta remember what division Crestview is in. Let me pull this up real quick because they might still have a shot here at the postseason. Let's see, Division 6. Should be Region 21 then. Crestview is currently sitting 22nd. And spots right now, 13 through 16 are open. And the 13 seed is 3-5, 14 is 6-2, 15 is a 3-5, 16 is a 3-5. So really the one thing against Crestview right now is the lack of a strength of schedule. But if you win here in the last 2 weeks, you go up to 4-5, you have some good losses on the year. They might be able to sneak in as a 16 seed potentially. So playoff race, not entirely out of the picture, not a great spot to be in, but these are unofficial rankings. This is up by Joe Idle. So that's where they're currently placed based on what he's got. OHSA hasn't dropped this week's computer point rankings just yet officially. So we don't know exactly where they're going to sit, but estimated to find around that 20 spot. So, I mean, final 2 weeks of the season, time to kind of amp it up, see what they got to finish it out.
Yeah, for sure.
Garrettsville Garfield also a 7 seed, not yet clinching a playoff spot, so they need this week to really get in there and snatch it. Got a couple teams that they have clinched playoff spots. We'll talk about that as we go on here. But our next game, Lowellville, McDonald, and I hate to say it, but unfortunately, Lowellville has called off the dogs these last 2 weeks against Sebring and McDonald. I mean, 41-8, 36-13. They still clearly manhandled them. But with the weather this past weekend, they didn't want to throw the ball as much. So they kept Vinny Ballone's basically perfect passer rating intact, but he's no longer on pace to get inside of those top 10s for records for the regular season. Perhaps what he does in the postseason can elevate him up to that status. We'll have to see how that develops. But Lowellville is now an 8-0 team. I don't think they're really worried about individual stats. I think this is one of those teams. They're really in that hunt. They feel that, hey, if we have any shot in the entire school's history to go out there and win a state title, it's this year. And I think with them kind of letting off the gas, expanding the running game, especially here these last 2 weeks, they've added a second dimension to their offense that's going to help them in the postseason. They've clinched a playoff spot. And with the win this week against Mineral Ridge, I think that they will clinch a top 4 spot potentially. JFK is the only one in Region 25 that's clinched the top 8 spot. Everyone else they've clinched a playoff spot. I think this would pretty much guarantee them that top 8. And with a big win like this, I think it might give them that edge. I think Mineral Ridge is Division 6, so I think it might be able to give them enough points as well that they might guarantee themselves 2 home games going into the postseason.
Yeah, and we'll see. But the biggest thing, like you just talked about, with the weather coming up in that game that was in McDonald, we all know that Louisville can throw the ball. We talk about their strength schedule. I don't care if it's weak or strong. I don't care what it is. If you can show that you can throw the ball and have a balance of running it too, that's going to be hard for any team in the playoffs to prepare for. So they get that going. If they can keep that going here in these last 2 games with Ridge and Western Reserve, I don't think anybody wants to see a Louisville team in the playoffs at all. For this firepower that they have, good luck.
In Mineral Ridge right now, 9 seed in the postseason,
yeah,
according to the unofficial rankings put out a couple days ago. So we'll see what the OHSAA does with their computer rankings. But Lowellville, they're sitting in a really good spot to finish out this year, and they honestly control their own destiny because every game is winnable for them. And I honestly still believe once they get into the postseason and you look at what they'll have to go up against, how can you not like them? Them and JFK, I think, have to be kind of the 2 favorites to come out of this Division 7 and make some noise. I would say Southern, too, depending. For me, weather, I think, really depends on how Southern is going to play. If teams can go out there and sling the ball against them and can throw a couple of warmer days, I think they're going to struggle, especially against a Lowellville-esque team or even Springfield if they keep, springing up. But I think if you get into the cold days like we saw this past Friday and the pass game isn't there for either team, I think that's when they can be at their strongest because they're such a power football team. I know they like to throw, and it helps them out too. Their offense is a lot better when they can throw, but when it comes down to it and you have to win the battle in the trenches, they were one of the best teams I've seen all year long at controlling the line of scrimmage for 9/10 of a game. They only lost it finally there in the 4th quarter, and Valley Christian took the game from them. But three quarters of football, they controlled the point of attack, and I think any team is going to have trouble going up against them in the postseason. But I think you look at Lowellville, and we haven't really seen the weather impact their ability to score that much. I think 36-13 on a cold night. That's the first time we've seen the offense dip below 40 points this season, and they still hit 36. So it's a really good team. I'm interested to see how they do this Friday against the Ridge, who has a good quarterback, a really good defense, good wide receivers, good linemen, and you're going to have weather. Again, it's going to be cold. I'm looking at the weather forecast right now for Friday, 57 degrees. It's going to rain Thursday. It's going to rain Saturday. High humidity, 13-mile-an-hour winds is what I'm looking at right now. It's going to be a crappy day for football, which means it's going to be a great day for football. And I think you look forward to this weekend for Louisville as a true test of what that ground game can do against the Ridge. And I think that'll really tell us, hey, what is this team going to be doing in the postseason if they get into some late November football?
Yeah, and we were talking about the Louisville McDonald game. I think it was Thursday we previewed that one. I was saying I kind of chalked that one up as a W for them, for Louisville, because I think we all did. But I was talking about this one for next week because I think this is a really, really good game. This Louisville Monroe Ridge game is going to be a really good one.
Yeah, it really is, and I'm excited to see what they can do. And we'll talk about that obviously on Thursday or Friday. I don't know which day yet. McDonald, not technically mathematically eliminated from the postseason just yet. 22 seed for them. They have 2 games left on the schedule: Waterloo, Jackson, Milton. I don't know if they'll be able to win it. I think they can at least keep it close. And when you're close, you got a chance, especially, like I said, this weekend, bad weather. It's in McDonald, grass field over there. It's not turf. If it's raining Thursday, you're going to have mud, and mud evens the playing field. Every season, doesn't matter what level, when there's a muddy field, it's teams become a lot more even. It takes away a competitive advantage from one team. You see it every single year. We didn't have it last season. We didn't have any mud bowls last year. We had perfect weather every Friday. Not this time around. I think McDonald has a chance for an upset if we get crappy weather during the week. They need something to kind of give them even the playing field, and that would be a muddy field if we can get some heavy rains in on Thursday and make that dirt over there muddy.
You look for advantage for anything. If the field gets wet and that's what helps you out and it gives you an advantage, so be it. Let's make it ugly.
Right. Now, our next game, though, South Range. Oh my God, they're amazing. Take down Jefferson 42-7. Canfield South Range is now one of the only teams in the state of Ohio that has clinched a top 4 spot, so that they will have back-to-back home games through the first 2 Fridays of the postseason. I mean, you look around and not many teams have been able to do it. There's a lot of groups that have gone and taken a top 8 spot, but not a lot have gone in and gone straight up for the 4, and they're one of the few that has done it. You have to give a lot of props to what they've done this season and just the way they were able to dominate against really good teams. I mean, we mentioned it, against Girard, against Jefferson, Kent Central Catholic, University School. No one has played this team close. The closest anyone has been was Struthers in week 4. It was a 10-point game. No one's been within single digits of South Range this season. And with Lakeview and Hubbard left on the schedule, Hubbard might make it fun. I don't think they stay within single digits, though. We're not seeing it.
I was just going to say that, too. I think this week's – I think they're going to beat Lakeview. I'll give that away now. I think we'll talk about it in the next couple of days. But
right,
the Hubbard game, I think so, too. I think they'll win that one to go 10-0. But I do like that one to kind of be a little bit closer on the part of Hubbard. But what else we talk about this team. This is one of the few teams every week that just with Louisville we're talking about. What do you even say about them? 8-0, they've done everything right. Like you said, the closest game has been 10 points. Everything else has been absolute blowouts on their part. So I talk about their depth. I really like that from their standpoint going into the playoffs and playing some of the other teams that they've gone through this season. There's just really nothing else to say about them. They're just a really good team.
And I still think it's shocking that they're better than they were last year. And you look at it, they had one of the top running backs in the state, but Billy Skirpak has done a great job leading this offense, and Shane Lindstrom as well, their top wide receiver, 132 yards per game for him. And actually, that might not be accurate. Their stats aren't completely up there on Max Preps, but still, the fact that he went for over 100 yards receiving in one game, I think, kind of tells you, they've been able to get to their weapons out there. And you just have to give a lot of credit right now to South Range for what they've done and what they look like they're going to continue to do. On the flip side of this, for Jefferson, I think we're kind of left scratching our heads, right? I mean, this was a really good team to start the season with wins against Grand Valley, who obviously, they're 1-7. Who cares? They won 66-27. Clearly, there was an offense here. They beat Edgewood, who we've come to find out, hey, they're not too bad. They won 56-14. Then their offense got shut down by Girard. And I think Girard figured out a recipe against this Jefferson team, and everyone since then has used it because Niles held him to 31, Hubbard held him to 25, Struthers held him to 14, now South Range holds him to 7. That clearly, opponents have figured out this offense, and I know part of that is familiarity because they've played for a long time. This will be Jefferson's last go-through of the NE8, and unfortunately, they're not going to take the conference and, give it that goodbye kiss and head off into the sunset with the win, and at the moment, they're sitting 5th. And obviously not where they were hoping the season was going to go. Still, postseason opportunities are available for them, but I think you just have to kind of have a head scratcher at this point in the year of what went wrong for Jefferson, because they looked really, really good early on, and now you find them going into week 9 against Poland, and you go, I think Poland might win this game after what we've seen, especially the last 2 weeks.
And like you said, after that Girard game too, their points have kind of gone down since then. So they just haven't really found many things going on. I think, sometimes you start out a little bit hot, whether they're against teams you should be beating or not, whether against strong opponents or not, you somewhat kind of tend to feel yourself. When you go into conference play, things change. So I think these teams have found ways to play them hard. And like I said, I think it's a game this week. You don't know what you're going to get out of it. So I think there's both teams in the same kind of category with them in Poland.
Yeah, Poland's actually a 5 seed right now. Jefferson and 8. Both control their own destiny, though. You win out, you're in. And I think that's the thing you have to remember at this point in the season. Throw everything else out. Yeah, you lost the last 2 if you're Jefferson. Now it's kind of time, throw it out. Doesn't matter. You're still in a spot. You can make the postseason. You just have to win. And I know you only have to win. It's probably the hardest thing to do. It's what the game is all about. It's finding a way to win. And it's obviously very hard, but I think we know they're capable. We know they're talented. And I think you just kind of have to be a little surprised with the way they've played in recent weeks that they are where they are, because this isn't the same Jefferson team we started out the year with seeing.
And these are 2 winnable games for them to come out to end the season. They're 2 really winnable games. They could go the other way, but they're not like they have no chance to win these games. So they have, where they want to go, they control these last 2.
West Branch took down Alliance 42-35. I mean, a close game for him here in this one, but West Branch, it's a really good team. And Drew DeShields, man, one of the best quarterbacks in our region, if not the best. I mean, there's an argument to be made for him because he's taken a solid strength of schedule. He's dominated, and his team around him has played phenomenal. They got a good test this week, but it was a great test this last week against Alliance, a really good football team, and they took it to him. They win 42-35. What more can you really ask of a team in that game? I mean, the Shields threw 53%, 3 touchdowns, and interception, also ran for 62 on the ground and 2 rushing touchdowns. It was a great performance, and got to give a lot of credit to wide receiver number 14 and pardon me, I'm pulling up his first name, Christian Martig. 146 receiving yards on 8 receptions for 2 touchdowns. Great numbers to put up.
Pretty good, yeah, for sure.
Pretty good, yeah. I'd have to say so, Mike.
But with this Alliance matchup from last week, I think it was a game that we were kind of, at least I was kind of thinking, it has potential for a shootout. Alliance, I think I saw the record. I think they only have 6-2. So I think it's a game we were looking at that had that potential, because normally when you have good teams going against each other, it could either be really close or it could be high scoring in a close fashion. So I think that's what we got with this one, 42-35. But then these last 2 games with them closing out with Carrollton and Salem, those are some two games from that are somewhat challenges too to close out. So we'll see what kind of football they play going into the postseason.
It'll definitely be an interesting finish. West Branch right now, they're a 1 seed. They've clinched a playoff spot. They're only one of 3 teams in Region 13 that actually has clinched a playoff spot, and only 3 teams have been eliminated from the postseason in this region. So it's still very wide open. A team like Youngstown East right now, technically, because they're actually not a 0-win team, because I don't know how it worked, but they ended up getting a forfeit loss from Cardinal Mooney. I don't know what happened there. Because the game was played, Mooney won it on the field, but for whatever reason, they end up having to forfeit it. And so in the official standings, Youngstown East is a 1-7 team so far in the year, and that has kept them in contention still to somehow find a postseason spot if they win out and their strength of schedule behind it gets a little better. But, I mean, wins against Ursuline and Cheney, they could bump up there.
Yeah, it's something we were just talking about.
I forgot about that win that they somehow had. Unfortunately, this next team, after this week's loss, has been officially eliminated from the postseason. Same region, one of just 3 teams that have been dropped. The East Liverpool Potters. They've lost 7 games in a row. They dropped this past week to Canton Central Catholic, unfortunately, and they have been dropped from the postseason potential. Maybe not the worst for them because, I mean, if you were going to get in, you were likely going up against West Branch. So they might have saved themselves in that game, not having to do it. They'll have Oak Glen this week, and I think they can keep that one close. Oak Glen is an up and down roller coaster team, but we see them get blown out every now and then. So I think it's a game potentially the Potters can win this week. But I think overall, kind of a disappointing season from a standpoint of you got that early win, then it was close against Indian Creek, and then everything just fell apart as you got into one of the hardest schedules out there. Salem, Beaver Local, Harrison Central, Edison, of course, and Canton Central Catholic, all high seeds in their respective regions. So it was a hard schedule this year for the Potters. Perhaps they can finish these final 2 against Oak Glen and Ware. But, I mean, we'll see how they finish. It's a down season. It's a rebuilding year, though, for them. So you don't stay too down on this. You look at it and go, yeah, disappointing season. Obviously, during a rebuild, you would love to just have a 5-5 year because it kind of inspires some of those kids to be like, hey, this rebuild is going somewhere. But it's unrealistic. And unfortunately, when you're having to go through this process, you're going to have seasons like this, and it's going to happen. You just hope you don't get too many of them.
Well, some teams are fortunate that is a rebuild for them is only going 5-5, but some teams around the area, like some like Ursuline over the years. But after those first 2 games, 1-1, keep the second one close. It's just been straight blowout since then on the part of East Liverpool. And I think, I don't want to say it this way, but that was kind of fitting after the last couple of weeks that's how they got eliminated, was getting blown out 49-6. But yeah, there was just nothing going for them after they hit conference play. After really those 6 games that they got blown out, and those are some really tough matchups for them.
Yeah, it is, and you just hate to see it, really. But our next game, a team still very much in the hunt for the postseason in Wyndham. They took the win this past week, beating Fairport Harbor 28-15. Good win there, coming off back-to-back losses. Really needed it, and now they have to go up against Matthews this week, who is 7-1, an 8 seed right now in the postseason. Pardon me, that'll be next week for him. No, that is this week. Then they finish with North Baltimore on the final Friday, who's a 2-6 team. They really need a win this week to kind of give them that opportunity to control their own destiny in this postseason. Even if they win out, there's no guarantee the Bombers make it to the postseason at this point. A 6-4 record might get it done, but they kind of need a little bit of help in front of them at the moment. Fairport Harbor at 2-6, they're a 22 seed. Kind of need some help there over as well.
Yeah, it's not guaranteed even if they win these last 2, but it's at this point you're playing a really good Matthews team at 7-1. You can't be worried about we got to win these 2 to even have a chance. Just go in and take this one care of business. It's going to be at least have this one at home. Coming after this win against Harding 28-15. So you got some momentum on your side, but that's a tough call task. But at least you got it at home.
Hey, Mike, I want to point this out. I'm watching the Phillies Atlanta game on my computer, same time we're doing this broadcast here, and I have to point this out. Someone a couple rows behind home plate, I don't know what they're eating, but they're using chopsticks. They're right behind home plate. I'm trying to figure out what they're eating. I'm like, you're at a baseball game using chopsticks in Atlanta. That very confused on what I'm just gonna keep my eyes glued here to try and figure out what's going on behind home plate. I'm a little kind of shocked there.
Okay. First of all, I was expecting a score update from you, but then you start bringing
No, it's still 4-1.
But
I don't know. Actually have a couple base runners now.
These Diamond Club seats behind home plate now. These teams are starting to get some fancy foods. I all these ones in Newark, they got sushi, so I wouldn't be surprised with sushi or some type of Chinese food. That's odd to see that at sporting events.
Right. I'm sitting here. I'm like, yeah. Why does this person have chopsticks?
What happened to just hot dogs and nachos and that's
hot
it.
Pretzel.
Yeah,
hot pretzel game. Although I ain't gonna lie, Philly cheesesteak when you're going to the Akron Rubber Ducks is awesome.
And the Phillies, they're playing nice tie in there.
I didn't even mean it. I was just thinking. I used to cook the Philly cheesesteaks for the Akron Rubber Ducks. It was amazing.
Yeah,
best food in the park there. Of course, only when I made it. I think I've tried it since. It's not as good.
Oh, of course.
I was the best. I was the best chef they had.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. Here's another team we were talking about a little bit ago, Mineral Ridge. They beat Sebring 48-14. And I mean, what a dominant season it's been for Tristan Valley and the Ridge Rams. And I know a couple of people around the region are pretty excited about this, obviously here at YSN, but also, Andy Hake over at Valley Christian formerly played for Mineral Ridge. And I keep talking before the game. It's like, hey, man, I love what they're doing over there. It's a great program. They're going in a great direction. I'm like, yeah, I mean, they really are. And, shout out right now, Ian Erb, 19th in the state of Ohio in rushing yards, 16th in the state of Ohio for total points, 16th in total touchdowns. Julian Rozzi is 23rd in the state for interceptions. And Tristan Valley is second in the state right now as the quarterback for punting average. He's averaging almost 43 yards a punt. And that's a phenomenal average to have him sitting at. And he also, Tristan Valley in Division 6 is 8th in passing yards, 7th in rushing yards. Ian Erb's 3rd in rushing yards. Mason Miller's the number 10 wide receiver in the division. And you just keep going down the line. And Ian Erb, 14th in the Division 6 for sacks. Rozzi's 5th in the division for interceptions. This is a really talented Mineral Ridge team that I can't wait for this weekend's matchup against Lowellville because, I mean, you talk about high-profile games. It doesn't get any bigger than this, and you have two teams that are just absolutely dominant in their styles of football. And maybe the one thing that the one game that we can compare, right? Springfield upset Ridge. Springfield kept it close against Lowellville, but Lowellville pulled out in the end. Got that late touchdown. They pulled away 42-24. And now you look at Ridge, and you're like, man, they played almost perfect football since then. So you really got to give a lot of love to this Mineral Ridge team. They've been playing really good.
And we keep talking about Louisville, rightfully so, about how their offense has been pretty deadly this year. It's the same thing on the side of Mineral Ridge. And I think talking about Tristan Valley, who was at Girard last year. And I forgot he even went to Mineral Ridge. So, and he did pretty well at Girard last year. Something made a change for whatever reason. They felt to make a change, and he went to Mineral Ridge, and he's picked up there what he did at Girard. So, again, I know we just talked about this. I know we'll talk about it at the end of the week, but I can't wait to talk about this game.
Yeah, I'll try and make sure it stays on your show instead of Matt's. But
some of us will talk about it. One of us will.
Yeah, I will for sure be talking about it, and I can't wait. But unfortunately for Sebring, I mean, another loss here in the cap. And you look at the last 3 weeks. Did they really stand a chance? I mean, Jackson, Milton, Lowellville, and Mineral Ridge 3 straight weeks. They really haven't. You look at the entire schedule, and they haven't had an opportunity to kind of find who they are. Started immediately against Lincoln West out of Cleveland, who's only finished 3-5, granted. But, they didn't play all that bad in that. They had some defensive deficiencies for sure. But then you go in the next week against Matthews, who was absolutely lighting a fire beginning of the year, and they lose 64-8. And then you go in absolutely zero confidence, and you lose to St. John, who you look back at, that's probably a game Sebring could have played in. And then you go against an average Waterloo, and you still didn't have any momentum. Below average McDonald, but they just couldn't find any momentum at that point in the season. They were already kind of out of it. And then you go through this gauntlet of teams, and now you find yourself against Western Reserve, and sure, it might be a winnable game. Western's has had a really tough strength of schedule, and obviously so has Sebring, but you just kind of have to feel for them and you go, man, it wasn't that. It could have been a lot better of a year than I think it turned out. They've been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs now, unfortunate to see, but maybe you can find a win here against Western Reserve in the final week, and you can take that into next year. But a lot of lessons to be learned from this season for Sebring for sure.
Yeah, when things don't go your way, it happens when you go through a tough stretch like that too. When things don't go your way, but you have an opportunity. I know it's not the year you want it, but you have an opportunity to kind of get a win at the end of the season and get something going into next season, because if it was just hard to go through a type of schedule like that. So get some type of momentum and kind of build on that.
Next game up after that, we have Poland. They took on Lakeview, and they won 9-0. So if you learned anything from the weather this past weekend, it's going to affect teams for the postseason. That's one thing I think we know for sure, because nobody really moved the ball very well this past weekend with how cold and windy it got. So expect that again this time around. Like we talked about weather, it's probably going to be into the 40s for this weekend's game with high wind, potentially wet conditions. It's going to be probably some pretty ugly football to watch, but I mean, they pull out a win against Lakeview, a Lakeview team, very tough defensively. I mean, they held Hubbard at 22. They held Niles to 13, Liberty to 8, Garfield to 17, LeBray to 7. Yeah, they had a couple get away from them against Girard and Struthers for sure, but they've had some really strong defensive performances this season, and a very good performance there. But Poland, again, winning close ball game. It's kind of been, the feather in their cap this season. They've won close games. They beat Hubbard in a 1-score game. They beat Girard in a 1-score game. Now you beat Lakeview 9-0. They were in a 10-point game, or 11-point game, against Louisville. So everything's been very close and right there for Poland this year, outside of the losses to Cheney and South Range and Canfield. Those were the only times games have gotten away from them. They've played really good football. They have a good spot for the postseason right now, and they control their own destiny going into this week's matchup against Jefferson.
First of all, I think the last couple weeks we're getting at least one baseball score a week. Not nothing that's still a baseball score to me, but it might be seeing that here.
Okay, Phillies now have the bases loaded off an intentional walk in the top of the 4th inning with 2 outs.
There we go. But
speaking
like
of
you
baseball,
said, yeah. Well, like you said with their wins, I like being able to. I even talk about I like having a balance of being able to win close and not so close games. But every single one of their games has been close, which is still good. I think that's why coming into this game against Jefferson this upcoming week, that's something I do like about them. But I think they'd still need a really convincing win and try to feel good about themselves. But I don't think they're going to get these last couple games. So just continue to win games is all that matters. But just get some type of momentum booster with, like I've been saying, with a lot of other teams going in these last 2 weeks and going to the playoffs if they get there. Or they're already in, right? Poland? Or not yet.
Let me go back to it. I don't know if they're officially in it. I got to figure out what division they were again. I think they were a 5 seed. Yeah, they were 5. Yeah. They control their own destiny. Technically, they have not officially clinched a spot yet, but right on the edge. Castellanos up at the plate for the Phillies right now, 1-1 count against Chavez on the mound.
Yeah, I just put it on my laptop, so we're both keeping track.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, right? It's the Major League Baseball postseason. It's the only time baseball really gets where every game in baseball matters. You can tune off a game during the regular season, and it's really not going to impact. Oh, cool, yeah, they won a game during the regular season. Get to the postseason, you're like, oh, right, yeah, this is actually good, intense baseball, finally.
It's intense. Every pitch matters. Literally, every pitch matters.
And there's another run. Oh, Phillies are going to try for 2 here. Oh, 6-1. They're smothering the Braves right now, Mike.
I know it's game 1. It's only the first game of the series, but Matt was on here. He's got some explaining to do.
Don't worry. I'll make sure to question him if he's on the show tomorrow. That's got to be a point. I was like, Matt, what happened here? What's going on? Oh, I don't know. That's going to be his answer. I don't know.
Well, he'll just ignore the Braves and talk about Cleveland if they win tonight. That's just how he is.
Yeah. Lakeview, not out of it. They're an 18 spot, so they still have an opportunity. They're 3-5 after the 9-0 loss. Unfortunately for them, South Range and Jefferson on the schedule coming up. So the likelihood is you can almost guarantee a loss today. Or, I mean, not today, this Friday. Unfortunately, because no one's touching South Range, and I don't think Lakeview is going to be the team to do it. They have good defense. They might keep it close like Struthers did. But
I don't even know about that.
Yeah.
Jordan had a good
by close, it might be a 30-point game.
Yeah.
And then Jefferson, with the way Jefferson's playing in this defense they have, I might give it to him. I thought Baum hit that out of the park. He didn't, though. Foul ball in baseball. But Lakeview, it's been an all right season. They could have been better. They started out 3-1. Then you got into the conference play against Girard and Struthers and Hubbard and Poland. Now South Range and Jefferson to finish the year. I mean, we talked about the gauntlet of the NE8 this season, and they were kind of one of the victims of it. I would say Jefferson was as well. Definitely Girard. Struthers probably would be a top-level team if they played in the MVAC. They would be probably up there in contention for the Scarlet tier this year if they had played over there. Unfortunately, they're in the NE8, and they've just had to go through this gauntlet of phenomenal teams. But I think Lakeview, they're in a good spot moving forward. I think they have a good program. And I think everybody in the NE8 right now just kind of has to hope, all right, South Range eventually has to have a bad season, and that's when we can get in there and capitalize.
Yeah. And I think, on the part of Lakeview, it's not by any means been a bad year. Obviously, there's some games that they feel like they should have won against this close game, 9-0 against Poland. Some other games that they, got shut out too. These last two back-to-back games, that's not really good. But it has been a bad season, but it's not what they want to be over at Lakeview.
A team that is having probably about a perfect of a season as they could have asked for, Addison. These Wildcats, man, are phenomenal at playing football. Had a good test this week against Harrison Central. They win 49-14. They have Buckeye Local this week, Indian Creek to finish out the year. I'm looking for some undefeated Wildcats. They're one of 3 undefeateds now in Division 5, Region 17. They hold the 4 spot. They have clinched a playoff seed. They sit behind Perry and Garraway. I honestly have to say they're in a great spot. Likelihood is they're not going to fall from that 4 spot, and they should have back-to-back home games for the postseason, going in as one of a handful of potentially undefeated teams, so long as they don't fall victim to the trap game in one of these final 2. I don't see it because it's a 2-6 Buckeye Local, 1-7 Indian Creek, and the one thing, they are playing them both on the road, bad weather. Got to watch out for the weather this week. That's how upsets are going to happen in these final 2 weeks. It's going to be that weather. Those field conditions are going to catch somebody. But Edison is in such a great spot here to finish out the season, Mike. I really like the trajectory they've gone this year. After 2021, they were 8-4. I mean, very promising year. They made it, one round of the postseason, though, and they lost in the first round 50-0. And now, second time around, they're doing a lot better.
Yeah, and I think, obviously you don't want to fall victim of the trap game here in these last 2 weeks, but I think with teams like Edison, for example, that's been really good all year, 8-0 to this point. I don't think, at this point you're thinking about cleaning up some things and preparing for the playoffs. I don't see a trap game for these last 2 games of Buckeye Local and Indian Creek. So I think they're sitting pretty good, really good chance to go 10-0 here.
And remember, we did start the season early this year. It's a week earlier than it used to be. So these week 10s that we're going to have this year, it was last year's week 9. Round 1 of the playoffs is going to be, that normal date that we see the round 1 of the week 10 of the season. So I think this will be one of the nice parts of it. You're not going to play absolutely dreadful, freezing cold weather potentially in that first round. It'll definitely be in the second and third when we hit November. But you might get a couple of early games that you might still get some 60-degree fall weather in there.
I remember when I was in high school and in the few years I played, I remember our last week being like October, Halloween, or even the first week of November, and we had some snow the first games. These games are just ending early. It just threw me off. I just forgot that they started early this week or started earlier this year.
Well, yeah, it's also because we're also like a week or 2 weeks ahead of the teams in West Virginia and Pennsylvania. So when you have these, continental matchups where you're going, one team against another from 2 different states. It's kind of created an awkward situation a little bit of times because we've had 4-0 teams going up against 1-1 teams. You're like, well, I don't really know how good that 1-1 team is.
Yeah. And by the way, Matt just texted me, so the Braves are messing up here. So
okay, he must be watching in.
So he admitted it.
Newton Falls, our next team to talk about. They drop yet another game back to back. They lost to Brookfield. I think they kind of came into this game against Liberty this past week with a serious lack of momentum, having 1 win in their last 6 games. I mean, obviously only 2 on the entire year, but you came in against a Liberty team who I think has had the complete opposite happen to them, right? They got the big win against Campbell. They went up 42-21. I was on the call for that game, and I was like, how is this team an 0-4 team when they went against Campbell? And, I kind of had that thought the next week. I mean, I had honestly gone in and went, Campbell must have been that bad that they just made a bad team look really good. And while I don't think they're great this year, I think Liberty has really turned over a new leaf with Tyson Lawrence Watson in their quarterback. I think he has really helped elevate this team to a whole new level now that they can put DiMattia back out there in the formation and utilize his skills elsewhere. I mean, he's getting offers from D2 and D3 schools for tight end, not quarterback. He got moved back to quarterback after, their old guy transfers over in DC Farrell to Ursuline. He goes back to his former spot at quarterback that he played his sophomore year. And halfway through the year, they make this change. Lawrence Watson comes in, and he lost the first game. Yeah, he didn't play all that great against Brookfield. But then since that game that they put him in, He's got a career record of 3-1, and he has all 3 wins. I like him this week against LeBray, and that'll put him at 4-4. They're not going to beat Garfield, but right now Liberty is the 16th spot. If you had told this team at 0-4 that they were one quarterback change away from potentially getting into that postseason, they would have been telling you, thank you. That's all we needed to hear. Let's go get it. And here they are, final 2 weeks of the season. You win, you're in. And they have that opportunity.
Yeah, you would have been telling your starter quarterback, hey, I'm sorry, but if this is going to make us win some games, then we got to make a change, because that's what we're doing here is try to win games. That's what it's about. And I think 42-21 against Campbell, like you said, that's not that impressive because Campbell was really bad. But I like that 1-point win at Champion too. It was on the road, and then a Newton Falls team that's been whatever.
Liberty has taken on the right teams at the right time. I think that's been the really big thing. I mean, you catch Champion at the beginning of a slump. Now you catch Newton Falls on a bad season where they've kind of just not had any momentum, and you catch them off a 34-0 loss to Liberty. To Brookfield, another game that I had called. And then, you come in here against an 0-8 LeBray. They just hit perfect timing, I think, with all these games. It's lined up just right for them to snag some of this postseason momentum potentially. And if they can keep riding it. Now, I don't think they're going to pull the upset over Garfield, but wouldn't that be something?
It would be.
I'd like to see the Leopards pull that off. That'd be really. I was
just thinking, especially if they beat LeBray this week and lose to Garfield, that would put them at 4-5. Yeah, and you're thinking, hey, if we didn't have the cancellation, things would have better. So I think that's a really good opportunity for them to get this one this week against LeBray, which I think they should, and anything can happen against Garfield.
Yeah, and I think the one thing, especially to build off with this team, this quarterback, he's a freshman. They found another freshman guy, and yeah, sure, he didn't throw a lot of touchdowns, and he had 4 interceptions, but completion percentage, I think at this young of an age, that's what you have to look at. Completion percentage, 53.5% in a freshman season, getting thrown in there in his first game against Brookfield. I honestly have to think, yeah, they're going to lose a lot with, Cunningham, DiMattia, John Lard, their top running back this year. They're going to lose a lot for certain, but I think now that we've seen yet again, they have been able to go out and find a quarterback at this level. Having a quarterback, is 9/10 of a good football team, or at least a competitive football team, is that quarterback position at this level. And with as many athletes as we know come out of this high school, and whether or not they transfer or stay in the program, I don't think I worry about the state of Liberty football going into next year. I think so long as they can keep Lawrence Watson in the program, they're going to be just fine going into next season with John Simon. And this season's still far from over. If they can pull that, upset victory in week 10, I think they should make the playoffs. If they lose it, however, I think they probably get eliminated. So it kind of all comes down. You win and you're in, 1-1 and you're out, 0-2, and you never had a chance. So we'll see how they can finish it. I'm very interested to see where Simon can take this program with Lawrence Watson as the star quarterback for the future for Liberty.
You got a quarterback, you got a chance.
Yeah,
that's how it goes.
Orange, unfortunately, they don't have a chance. Don't have a lot of time here left in the show, but Orange 0-8. They dropped to Perry 42-9. Jackson Milton was in a baseball game against Waterloo on the road that ended up 7-0 in favor of the Blue Jays. Kind of surprised. Neither one of those teams is really a low-scoring team all year long. There goes the weather, and they just pull it out. And I would say Jacksonville, they're on the better side of average, but I still think they're right kind of there, borderline good. Waterloo, I think it was one of those games too, especially they got caught on the bad side of a losing streak. I think they could probably bounce out of it this week against McDonald. Might give them a shot against Mineral Ridge final week. LeBray, it's just a bad season for them. What can you say? They got Liberty this week, Campbell next after that. Campbell might beat them. I think that'll be an interesting game in week 10 to potentially give them. But, going against Brookfield last week, they didn't have a shot. I'm surprised Brookfield didn't win by more, but that's kind of Randy Clark's philosophy. He's not going in there looking to blow you out. He's going in there. He wants to win his game. He wants to take out his starters as soon as he can. But he won't take his starters out before you do. So if I had to guess, I didn't see the game. I didn't watch the recap. I'm guessing LeBray pulled that starting group pretty early on, and that was going to be a late touchdown for LeBray in there. It would be my guess, but Brookfield, they're in a phenomenal spot to finish out the season. I really think that They're going to make some noise in this postseason. They're going to potentially have, if they win, they should have a home game. If they lose to Garfield this week, I think they drop to the to going on the road, because at the moment they are a 7 spot. Top 8 teams make it to play a 1 home game. Top 4 teams get 2 home games. With a loss to Garfield, I think they drop, even with the second win in there. 9-1 Brookfield this year might finish at a 9 seed, because they're in a really competitive region right now at the top.
Hey, there's just scenarios, man, everywhere. Keep running through it. I love it. It's that time of year.
It's that time of the year, and I think you just really have to look. This Division 6, Region 21. I know I've been looking at it like I don't think there's many teams that have a great shot to come out of it, because Kirtland currently leads it, and obviously no one's been getting past Kirtland the last 10 years. But Mogador is the 2 seed. Valley Christian, baby, is the 3 seed. Dalton's 4. Canton Central Catholic is 5. Cuyahoga Heights, who Valley took on last year in the D7 playoffs, is the 6th spot. Brookfield 7. Rootstown 8. Ridge is 9. United is 10. Ravenna is 11. Middlefield Cardinal is 12. Trinity Garfield Heights is 13. Jackson Milton, a 6-2 team, is a 14 seed. PV is 15. Independent 16. Brooklyn is a 17. You just look at this entire region, you really go, man, there's some pretty good teams in there that probably on any given Friday, you give most of them a shot to win a game.
Yeah, it's pretty, well said. It's pretty loaded. It's pretty, good conference, strong conference. So we'll see. I'm
taking Valley Christian to come out of there all the way, baby.
Well, I know that.
Way.
I think we all are.
I'm pulling either Valley Christian or Brookfield. I mean, I think what I really, really want, regional championship Valley Christian versus Brookfield. I mean, that's just what the world needs. Because Randy Clark and Andy Hake, they're actually friends as well. So it would be a great coaching matchup because they both know each other really well. I was talking to Clark in that Newton Falls game. It's like, oh yeah, I know Hake. We go way back. I think something all the way back to high school or something at Mineral Ridge. And that would be the matchup for me, man. Just to decide everything, especially because that means one of them has to get past Kirtland. And to see that happen, one of those 2 teams, especially if it's Valley Christian out of the South Side, the new Youngstown boys go in there and they took down the perennial powerhouse of Kirtland. And if that was to happen, it means probably the other would have to go through Mogador. And just what a finish to the season that would be. Randy Clark, Andy Hake, taking down the 2 perennial powers to find one another in a regional title game to go to the state championship or to make it to Canton. That's the storyline that YSN needs.
Friends on the gridiron going against each other in the playoffs.
Not friends on the gridiron. Friends on the streets, enemies on the gridiron.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
And I've just kept going back to this quote I got from Andy Hake earlier in the season. It was just he wants Kirtland, and I've never heard somebody say they want Kirtland at this level. Nobody is going out there going, "Hey, I want the best team, and I want them." And it wasn't even that he wanted to go in there and win; he wanted just to get that opportunity. He's like, "I am fine dying a gladiator's death," and it's just that's the mentality that this team has every week. They're gladiators going to war, and it's great to see. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have left in the show today. I'm Alec Brennan. That's Mike Wolfgang. Matt Morrison rejoins the show tomorrow. Power Hour coming up next on your sports network.